left, right.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of SipTalk. Today we are talking about homelessness in the United States, especially the big cities. Also talking about healthcare, mental health care, etc., etc. You'll have to listen to the whole episode to hear our thoughts. Let me know in the comments that you're here. Give me a thumbs up so I know you're watching this. It makes me feel good. I'll see you guys on the other end. This is SipTalk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Of course, it's good.
Cheers.
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 Right, looks like we are live. This is Sip Talk, episode 209. My name is Justin DiGio, out of my basement. Joined by James, the Bosnator Boswell, philosopher, professional referee, bartender, most exciting of all, accountant, whose biggest handicapped said he's always correct. James, how's it hanging down there in sunny South Carolina?
It's been nice down here. Almost 80 degrees today.
Fuck off, man. It was raining all day. I'm like just getting over being sick, and it rained on me all day long. I think I'm also getting blurry here. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it's too early in the cast to be that drunk.
I heard you crack a beer. We'll get to the topic in a minute, but I heard you crack a beer. I'm curious what you got there.
Bush Ice. And I'm
Bush
looking
Ice.
to find a Bush Ice neon sign for the garage.
That's, I think
It's really easy to find a Bush Light one, but Bush Ice is much harder.
You don't want that in the living room? You want that in the garage?
Like I'm completely retooling the garage. I sold my old pool table and I'm waiting on a new one. And with the opportunity afforded by having a ton of space in the garage temporarily, we threw out a ton of crap and like making the garage much nicer so that way we've got more space to play pool. I set up like a little media station, like basically an old set of speakers and an old monitor. So like you can just plug an HDMI cord into a laptop, or if you've got your phone, you can plug the 3.5mm jack into the phone, and then you've got a set of speakers to play music. Because before, like if we were playing pool or hanging out in the garage, well, the only thing that you could listen to was yourself.
Right.
And so
now you got a media setup. All right, sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
So, speaking of your garage, today we are talking about homelessness and mental health, a very serious issue. We'll try to make as light of it as possible, but also try to stick to the facts. We're going to be serious about it.
Well, we're starting with healthcare, actually, because it's like, what's wrong with America? And I feel like all three of these issues are related and it kind of flows. So we're talking about like our healthcare system and why it sucks so much.
So on that note, though, this is part like 4 or 5 of a series of what's wrong with the United States, how to fix it. We don't know that we'll get to how to fix it. But
I've got some ideas as to how to fix some of these things.
I got Chat GPT up here with a question in the chamber. So when we get there, if we have time for it, I'd love to ask Chat GPT. But yeah, I think even the fact that we're having a conversation about it and sharing our perspectives, I think is valuable. Just it's good to have conversation, in general about this. So you want to start with healthcare? Is that fair?
So, yeah, healthcare, and just a quick statistic. Can you pull up that link that I sent and go to Exhibit 4 and put that on your screen?
All right, let me share the window here. This private window.
Because in the United States, I'll talk while you're working on that. Okay. In the United States, we spend more money per capita than any other country on the globe, and we have worse results than many other countries that spend less. And like, there's a lot of reasons for that. So that one right there is, I think, the best. So you can see that you've got this cluster of a variety of countries.
Okay.
So you got Netherlands, Norway, Australia, New Zealand, etc. And you can see that they're all kind of clustered around. And like as you go farther to the right on the graph, that's more money that
The
like
more
the country
spending,
spends,
the more
and then the higher
spending.
up is like the results that they get from their healthcare. So not only are we way lower on the graph than everybody else, we're way off to the right. It's almost like you can just say like, who doesn't belong here?
It's a really great representation of spending does not mean performance.
And so I think part of the problem, actually, most of the problem in the United States comes from the fact that we have this kind of privatized healthcare system where the the money that's being made in healthcare is not really being made by the doctors, but it's being made by insurance companies, billing companies, and in a huge system of bureaucratic red tape when it comes to the finance portion of it.
Well, plus the drug manufacturing companies.
Well, yeah, you can also look and see like the same prescription drug, literally exact same, even like the name brand. In and you look at the price in the United States, and then you look at the price in say Mexico, and our price is like 10 times higher. Or
Yeah.
you can look at something as basic as insulin, which costs like pennies per dose to manufacture. And when insulin was like when they discovered the process to make synthetic insulin that had a huge like almost overnight gave diabetics like
A
a,
chance to
a
survive.
yeah. And when the people who figured this out realized what they had, they declined to patent it because they knew how important it was. So like they chose not to patent it and not to get rich off of it because it was such an important discovery. And now you've got some people who like the price of insulin is so high that there are people like diabetics that will be rationing their supply of insulin through the month because like they can't afford a full dose. So like they'll wait until it's an emergency to use any of it, whereas they really should be using it all the time as prescribed. But they don't because they can't afford the full amount as prescribed.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the thing about and I have mixed feelings on this. The cost of drugs and the reason drug companies say drugs cost so much money is because the research and development stage of the drugs is very costly.
Well, and
So
there's truth to that.
and yeah, and they need to have a certain patent period on the drug where they can recoup their money, keep the prices high, and there is a certain truth to that. But to me, it also really feels like toll booths, right? We do some work to the road, we put up a bridge, we put up a toll booth to justify and pay back the cost of that bridge or whatever it is. But toll booths never go away. I mean, I guess technically now they do, but now it's just like virtual billing or whatever. You're still getting told for it. It's just you don't have to slow down anymore. So
Well, you could also look at it as like things like where like the cost of the drug doesn't really seem to have any connection whatsoever with like the research and development that went into it. Sure, there's these like novel gene therapies where it's like $1.5 million per dose or something, and a tremendous amount of work went into making that drug work. I kind of get the cost there, like, but when you look at something like an EpiPen, which is a technology that we've had for how long? 30, 40, 50, 60 years? I don't know, but like decades. There's no
yeah,
more research being done on this. This is like we know how to make this, and there's not really any advantages to like refining the process. Um, and those are going for like $300 a dose or something when they cost like $1 or two to make. And like there's no reason why those couldn't be $10 or $20, and you still got a great profit margin as the pharmaceutical company. Um, and like back to insulin, but I think part of the problem is like going back to the history of how we got here. Um, like the privatized healthcare system runs on insurance, and most people get their health insurance through where?
their jobs, their employer, with the majority of it being paid by the employer.
Yeah, so people don't really know the true cost of healthcare because they're not paying it directly. Like they don't really see what the employer is paying for their healthcare plan. But the idea of having job related healthcare, if you talk to basically any other country and say, should your healthcare be tied to your employment, they would look at you like you just asked an incredibly absurd question. Like, should I send my dog to the moon?
Well, I think that's because people outside of America, people don't have as high healthcare costs and health insurance costs. In the United States, that the cost of health insurance just being so high that only an employer who's profiting off you just being there could afford to pay that bill.
Hmm. And the reason why health insurance got tied to um, like your job was back in like right after World War II. Company like the economy was growing really fast because we were in recovery from a war, and so companies were struggling to be able to hire the people that they wanted to, and at the same time like tax rates were really high, where like today the highest tax rate is I think 37%. In the 1950s it was like 90.
Yeah, that
Now you
was
had to earn a lot of money to get there, but still like it
if you
got to
were
the
earning
point where
billions of dollars, yeah, you weren't able to spend most of that money, and that's really what where we
yeah.
see the concentration
And
of
well,
wealth right
what
now.
happened was if you're a company and you're looking to get like the best workers, like offering higher wages wasn't necessarily the best way to compete,
Because
because
they were
if
being taxed on that, higher wage meant a higher tax. They're not actually getting that much more in their pocket.
right.
So how
But
else do we incentivize them?
what was so-called cafeteria plans, so various types of benefits that were offered as part of the job, would not be taxed. So for example, like if your job had like a gym in there and you had free membership to the gym, that's something of value that's offered to you, but you don't
Mhm.
have to pay tax on it. And so healthcare plans were under this umbrella of cafeteria plans, and they weren't taxed. So a lot of businesses started competing by saying, we're going to offer really good healthcare plans. And that's our way of attracting talent. Because if we're paying $30,000 a year, which in 1950 was a lot, and if we were to offer $35,000 a year, but they're getting taxed 50% of that, that's not really going to attract a lot of workers. But if we were to offer a healthcare plan that's worth $3,000 or $4,000 a year, and they don't have to pay tax on that and we still get the deduction. That's how they got workers. And
Well,
that system really just kind of once companies
listen,
started doing it, everyone started doing it.
there's added incentive as well because you keep your workers healthy, showing up on time, and working hard.
Yeah, and the other thing is back when this system was kind of in its infancy, most of the insurance companies operating in healthcare were nonprofits. So they weren't looking to make money by being an insurance company per se. Whereas now the vast majority of health insurance is for profit. So health insurance companies, just like any insurance company, have every incentive to deny a claim. Because you deny a claim, you don't have to pay out anything.
Well, a lot of the employers were not publicly held companies, and the insurance companies were not for-profit companies. So that really works pretty complementary. Um, and now it's the exact opposite.
Hmm.
So, what else do you want to add on healthcare? Because I do want to transition into mental health and into homelessness because I got a lot of
So,
notes on homelessness.
real quick, I saw, and I'm probably getting the numbers wrong here, but there was a conservative politician or a conservative columnist talking about how like a Medicare for all or like a socialized medicine program in this country would cost about $30 trillion over some period of time, maybe 10 years. And somebody responded and be like, hey, how about you mention the fact that our current system over that same period of time would cost 43. So like we're spending a ton of money and we're just getting shit outcomes. And that's because there's so much waste in the middle. And I'm not saying that private health insurance should go away entirely, but having a government subsidized government subsidized or a socialized medicine system and eliminating the largesse and profit motive of health insurance companies and allowing most people to just go with the baseline care that the government provides. And then if you're really well off and you want private health insurance or you want to have a private doctor that you're paying for out of pocket, go right ahead. But there's so many people like ask somebody it, ask somebody like how medical billing works. and
Look,
see if you can get a straight answer.
I think we've talked about this before. You know, I've been to the hospital, ask how much something costs, and they have no idea. And I'm like, okay, could you just look at it? Like I asked them, like, oh, could you tell me what this would cost? They go, oh, yeah, I can't tell you that. I said, oh, not a problem.
You can look it up.
I don't mind. Like, I don't mind. Like, what do you mean you don't mind? I don't mind you looking it up. Look it up, motherfucker. I'm standing right in front of you. Like, and they look at me like I have 3 heads, and they're like, no, we can't look it up. What do you mean? We don't know how much it costs.
Imagine going to any other store and pulling a product off of the shelf and saying, "Yeah, I'd like to buy this. How much is it?"
I don't know. Okay, I don't mind. Just
Can you scan it?
there's no scanners.
Well, can I buy it? Well, yeah.
Yeah,
As
of
soon as you
course.
walk out the store, like we'll charge you. Well, okay. How much are you going to charge me? Oh, we'll send you a bill in a monthly, like, and you'll find out then.
And also, that bill may not be the total bill.
Right.
Oh man, sorry. It's just funny because I've been there. I've been there a few times.
No, it's completely absurd. You know what the number one reason for filing bankruptcy in this country is?
Medical bill collection. I don't know.
Medical debt. Medical debt is the number one reason why people file for bankruptcy in this country. The entire system is entirely stupid, and it doesn't benefit. The only people that this current system benefits are the health insurance companies. And I remember, like, when the Republicans were railing against Obamacare and socialized medicine, they're like they're trying to take away your health insurance. And I'm just like, does anybody like their health insurance? How is this a bad thing? Like, oh no, not my health insurance company.
Well, I mean, I think it was, if I was saying, hey, everybody's going to get a free car, and then I'm saying, well, they're going to take away your car. You're like, well, this is a car I have. This is a car I like. This is a car I decided on. The issue is just people are losing the choice. They're used to what they have. They don't like change, and they're in fear of a inferior product. And that's the biggest thing is that they're getting something for free basically, but running the risk of it being inferior. And a lot of people who have health insurance covered by their employer, a lot of them have pretty top tier policies. So and those are the people that are going to be a lot louder, because they have something to lose. And
They're also the people that are more readily able to donate politically.
I just read a Psychology Today article, and I don't think this is news to anybody, but fear of loss is a greater motivator than interest to gain.
In gain, yeah.
So, all right, let's.
All right, so mental health, real quick. Like for the longest time, it wasn't until like Obamacare in 2009 or 2010 required that qualifying health plans offered basic mental health services as covered as like covered things under the plan. But before that, many healthcare plans did not cover mental illness at all.
Well, I think because mental illness wasn't something that was openly talked about. I remember maybe 15 years ago or so, the idea of talking about going to a therapist was like something you wouldn't bring up. And I was listening to a podcast today, and one of the podcast hosts was just talking about what she talks about with her therapist. And I remember thinking to myself this afternoon, like, that's just odd that you would share that, one, you're in therapy, and two, the topic of your conversation with your therapist.
I still think that's weird, but it's way more accepted today than it would have been 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, you and I may think it's weird, but yeah, correct. So, mental health focus just wasn't there a couple decades ago, and that's why it wasn't covered, because the focus wasn't there. It wasn't, people weren't having conversation about it. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're not going to solve the crisis in this conversation, but having the conversation, bringing awareness to it, I think does play a role, and hopefully more people will continue to talk about it. So
and that's one of the problems that's plagued mental illness for a really long time is, and we're better about it today, but so often someone would be like depressed, clinically depressed, and people's response to it would be buck up.
Yeah.
And
that is actually one way to deal with depression. But dealing with depression is very complicated. And
just saying like, get over it like saying the problems are all in your head, so you already have the tools to deal with it, and just
Yeah.
like toughen up. That was a very like a wide societal response to all sorts of mental illnesses for a very long time.
But like, we have alcohol.
Well,
Not
yeah.
a funny joke. Not a funny
Let's
joke.
replace one mental illness with substance abuse.
So substance abuse, another reason for homelessness. We got to get to this homelessness and
No, we will, because the mental health
mental health
plays
can be a
right in.
bridge. I feel like mental health can be the bridge.
Yeah, mental health is the bridge, because like we start with healthcare and talk about why we suck at healthcare and why probably socializing medicine is the best. Like if you look at all the other countries, like they have better outcomes than us, and they spend less. What are they doing different? Well, they're not running all of their transactions through people that seek only to profit by being middlemen.
I think the amount of profit in the healthcare system is really the issue. Like there's no attention that's being drawn to like where the money's going, and just the obscene. Uh, you know, my friend Adam, a couple summers ago, I was trying to get his attention. He was pissing in a bush, so I threw uh, uh, something at him, and it whizzed right by him, but it caught the side of his head, and he's bald. So he started bleeding. He went and got like 3 stitches, something like that. We were a little drunk, being obnoxious. He didn't get the stitches till the next day, but they couldn't tell us how much that cost. It cost like $3,500, and then like another $1,800 after that. That just was billed out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And for 3 stitches. For 3 stitches.
You know who's not seeing a lot of that money?
The doctors and the nurse that did it.
Correct.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
like, doctors and nurses, by and large, aren't the enemies in this system.
well, I mean, they don't do the billing, so
No.
you can't put the blame on them.
Because even like if you're a doctor that runs your own office, like you're not a doctor in a hospital, you run your own private practice for something, like you're still not doing the billing.
All right, hit me with the mental health. We got to get it.
So mental health, like yeah. So we've
I have way too many notes.
We've
on
sucked at
homelessness.
we've sucked at healthcare, and we sucked at treating mental illness with our healthcare, and we've gotten better about it recently. But I think when it comes to mental illness, and this is kind of the bridge to homelessness, is the deinstitutionalizing of America in the 80s, where you had a tremendous population of people that were in mental institutions, which had their problems.
Well, can I have some notes here on
Yeah,
on
you want to
Reagan?
talk about deinstitutionalization?
Let me read a few of my notes here. Reagan and Brown, 2 of the most consequential governors in California. So this is specifically about California, but it plays out for the rest of the country.
And also, California has like the biggest problem with homelessness. So,
but yeah, when we get to mental health in California, the 2 are tied very closely. But Reagan and Brown, 2 governors of California, they led the state during the 2 most well-intended but poorly executed movements in the state's history. First was the deinstitutionalization of mental. Maybe it's too much scotch here. Deinstitutionalization of mental ill, starting in the 60s. The movement started in Europe, was supported by Kennedy, and ultimately it got complicated by a Supreme Court decision about civil liberty concerns over forced treatment. So we institutionalized people, and they were stuck in the institution, and it wasn't on them to leave. They couldn't decide they wanted to leave. They were forced to be stuck in that institution. The U.S. Supreme Court weighed an opinion and basically concluding that if an individual is not posing danger to self or others and is capable of living without state supervision, the state has no right to commit the individual to a facility against his or her will.
Makes me think of a quick story. Like 3 psychology professors tried this experiment where they faked having symptoms of, I don't know, it might have been bipolar or something. And they faked these symptoms so that they could get admitted to a mental hospital. And then after like a day or so in the mental hospital, they went and just like started acting normal to see how long it would take for them to get released. And it was a struggle for them to get out.
I think there's a movie about this, actually. Do you know how long it took them to get out?
I think like 2 weeks.
Oh, I thought it was way longer than that. I
It
thought
might have been. I don't know.
I thought it was a couple of years.
No, it wasn't that long.
Well, I may be confusing this movie. The movie's in Spanish, I think.
Yeah, so like the idea of like being stuck in a mental institution and like keeping people that shouldn't be in a mental institution there is bad. But at the same time, I think we can all recognize that there are probably some people that need to be in a mental institution.
That's kind of where we stand with the mentally ill and unhoused in New York City. So this is from Vern Pearson, who's the El Dorado in California County District Attorney. Just more on. So that was the Reagan deinstitutionalizing the mentally ill, and then the second, which was fueled by concerns about perceived mass incarceration, and this is from this guy, and the reality that our jails and prisons had become the de facto mental health facilities. The
Well,
result,
that's still true today.
it is, well, it's more true today because of, but the result is fewer inmates and significant increases in homeless and untreated mentally ill on the streets. So let's see. He says, I witnessed this as county prosecutor, deputy attorney general, and El Dorado County District Attorney. As someone with more than 27 years in the pursuit of justice, I worry for the people on the streets and the victims of their future crimes. The history of psychiatric treatment isn't pretty. Too many people were institutionalized for mental disorders, suffered abuse, neglect, and mistreatment. Governor Reagan signed the Lanternman Petris Short Act in 1967, all but ending the practice of institutionalizing patients against their will. When that began 50 years ago, California mistakenly relied on community treatment facilities, which were actually never built. And the Lantern Petris Short Act made it virtually impossible to compel treatment prior to extreme decompensation. And that became very clear with the number of mentally ill entering the criminal justice system, which doubled the first year after that was enacted.
So yeah, that was one of the big problems of deinstitutionalization was the idea that we're going to take all these people that are in these buildings and unable to leave, and we're going to transition them to kind of outpatient treatment where they live their lives and come and get treatment from time to time or as necessary. And so they accomplished the first half of that by closing all the institutions, but they never followed up on step two.
But then these people end up on the streets, and
because they're not getting treatment,
and they never followed up with the actual treatment centers. So then these people didn't get treatment, started committing crime, started going crazy, schizophrenic, total chaos in the streets, and then got locked up. And then there was no place outside of the jail to keep them. But now we have this cycle where these people get locked up and let back out, and it's not.
And it's not like jail is a great place for your mental health, even if you're getting treatment in jail, and even if that treatment in jail is good, being in jail by itself is not going to be great for your mental health.
I mean, yeah, it's that's I've asked this a few episodes ago. Like, what happened to all these institutions? They literally evaporated. I remember hearing about them.
They just became abandoned buildings.
I've talked about the movie Girl Interrupted before, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. These places literally just disappeared. And now what do we do with the mentally ill? Because the very liberal approach is you can't touch them. They have the right to be doing what they're doing. The very right-wing approach is lock them up, get them off the streets. But there's really nowhere in between that I can think of. Nobody's proposing mental health care facilities, and especially effectively the forced treatment of the mental health.
So in a conversation I had earlier this week, talking about homelessness,
You
like,
want to quote Rosh just because
oh yeah. So Ross, so the psychology experiment I was mentioning is called the Rosenhan experiment, and Ross says the average time that the patient spent in the hospital was 19 days. All but one who were diagnosed with schizophrenia in remission before their release. So I was right at about 2 weeks.
Okay, yeah. I'm thinking of something else. I'm pretty sure it's a Spanish movie that's like on Netflix now. I don't understand great Spanish, so
So, like, if you look at homelessness, and this is also mental illness tied into it, but if you look at the the kind of the far left and the far right approaches to these problems, both really leave a lot to be desired. Because the liberal approach, unless you're super liberal, you're going to end up seeing that it's just way too permissive, and it leads to these huge homeless encampments that, like, even in San Diego, I saw a article or a news story where they were interviewing people on the street that were trying to get out of their leases of downtown San Diego apartments, because as soon as they left their apartment building, there were just homeless people everywhere. A
Mhm.
couple blocks from where my brother lives, um, is kind of like the main stretch of Ocean Beach in San Diego, where there's bars and restaurants and shops and everything. And at like 10 o'clock at night, outside of a bar, like 8 homeless people just jumped a random guy because he wouldn't give them money. Like, he wasn't doing anything besides just walking by, and like they asked him for money and he said no, and he got jumped. And so, like, by being so permissive and not dealing with homelessness and just saying, well, this is just the choices that people make, and we need to stop judging them and, like, let them do their thing, you end up with these problems where, for the average citizen, parts of the city become unlivable.
Well, I think that this is this is where we're sort of drawing the line. We took the angle into this conversation uh, about homelessness from the angle of mental health, and we actually started with healthcare. Okay, but homelessness, as we call it, you're calling these homeless people attacked some guy in the street. But when we say homeless, it means to say the unhoused, as if the issue is housing.
Well,
But
it is.
no, not the issue for homeless is housing, but the issue for mentally ill who roam the streets and uh, and taunt passersby and play in traffic and lay down in the streets and sleep on the sidewalks and
Like,
shit in the
almost always those people, it's going to be either drugs or mental illness or
yeah,
both.
they shit in the entrance to a building when to a business because it's closed and unlit and it's a private place to take a crap in the middle of the night. That's usually mental illness. But it's not new to places like New York City or Los Angeles or where your brother lives in California. It's also not new to many countries around the world. India is a huge example of an unchecked homeless population. But more so in India, the ability to rise up and overcome the homelessness issue, is much more difficult. They don't have a
Well,
social.
India, the homelessness thing, like, India, is the problem is pure poverty.
Well, but they also because pure poverty because there's no social welfare system helping support these people.
Well,
Once
and
you
it's
hit
also,
that,
you've got a huge population and just limited resources, and, like, they haven't built up the infrastructure where, like their most recent prime minister, one of his big campaign promises was building toilets, because so many people, like, just defecate in the open in India because there's no toilets. So
that's yeah, but that's why it's a developing nation, which is the rebranding of third world country.
yeah.
But they don't have a system to help these people out of homelessness, right? Whether these people rot or prosper within their homeless ecosystem. Even if they're prospering in that ecosystem, they're not making it out, right? They could be the king of the block in their homeless encampment, but it's very unlikely for them to make it out. But take the India homeless population and juxtapose that to the New York City or the Los Angeles one. Whereas, the extreme highs of cost of living is not the face of homelessness. the face of homelessness in New York City isn't Sally, single mother of three who lost her job at the factory, is down on her luck. And I'm not saying she doesn't exist.
No,
The,
but
the
those
majority of homeless,
yeah.
but the ones that we see, those aren't the ones you see laying in the street. Those aren't the ones you see injecting themselves with needles on the sidewalk in broad daylight at 2:00 in the afternoon in Midtown Manhattan. And I'm not saying I saw one once. I'm saying every day I can walk down the streets and see these people.
Well, you know what I think it might be useful? I can think of like broadly 4 categories of homeless people.
I just wanted to connect the end of my point, though, is that when you juxtapose India to New York City, the social welfare systems in New York City, the ability to pull people out of this utter poverty, should they choose, they exist. And a lot of money is being spent on them. And arguably too much money. We talked about healthcare, where too much money is being spent on healthcare, yet there's very little results. So much money is being spent on the homelessness issue with very few results. Sorry, I know you wanted to add.
So I think it's important to kind of make this distinction. I would broadly state that there are 4 types of people that are homeless. You've got the mentally ill.
Mentally ill.
You've got people with severe drug addiction.
Okay. Substance
abuse. And there can be overlap between these categories, but like,
I'm sure. I got a list here. So you got mental illness, substance abuse.
You've got people who actually choose to be homeless because that's something that they actually want.
I think that would be a fraction of a percentage.
Oh, I'm not saying, but and then the 4th category is people who have genuinely had a really bad run of luck. And
let me can I give you my list, because it's pretty. The last couple are in line with the last thing that you said, but mentally ill, substance abuse, untreated medical issues, traumatic events, violence and abuse, lack of affordable housing, and difficult sustaining employment. So really the last 3 or 4, traumatic events, violence, abuse, affordable housing, and employment, would be what we are sold on as to be the face of homelessness. And that's where we direct our efforts. But
I don't think that, but so like the last 4 that you listed, I would kind of put under the people who are genuine, like who have experienced genuine hardship or bad luck that put them in a homeless situation. And so of the 4 categories that I use, I would say that those are the people most reachable, because they're not there by choice, and they're there by circumstances outside of their control.
The issue is when they descend into the substance abuse.
Well, yeah.
Or those susceptible to mental illness goes unchecked and they become more mentally ill.
So in the conversation I was having about homelessness, I was talking about how difficult it is to solve, but very quickly I came up with like a short little plan as to how we would deal with it if you were to put me in charge.
Rosh did add that there might be a slight a percentage of the homeless population who have lost a bet, and that's why they're homeless, like in the Eddie Murphy movie Trading Places.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's
sorry, go ahead.
Like, you say that we spend a lot of money in New York City to deal with homeless. I think that the problem, one, needs a lot more money, because I don't think that it's actually a housing problem so much. There's a lot of unused housing in this country. And if we were to take money and be able to, and use it to house the homeless, like that would help a lot. The other thing is, and I know this because I had a roommate that worked at a homeless shelter in downtown Charleston. And the shelter had a no drugs or alcohol policy, which on its face makes sense, because if you say we're here to help you and we're trying to provide like a safe environment for you and others, then we can't have drugs or alcohol in here, because being in this shelter is a privilege, right? The problem is with a lot of homeless people, and this is just kind of in general, when somebody has a problem, even if they're not homeless, like if you have a friend that has an apartment or a house but is battling drug or mental illness issues, like you need to be able to meet people where they are. And if someone is addicted to heroin and will go through vicious withdrawals within a day or two if they don't use heroin, then saying we won't help you until you stop using heroin might be a non-starter for them. They might want to quit, but they're physically incapable of doing that right now. And so by having these really harsh policies of no drugs or alcohol, then you're effectively diminishing your outreach by a significant amount, and you're not getting to people who you might be able to get to if you met them where they were.
Well, but that's, I mean, it's a tricky line to draw, but it's just having the understanding of someone who's using, you know, whatever substance, and understanding where they're coming from, but then also having the program to help pull them out of it. But I could tell you one thing, that you know, if we just poured a bunch of money and opened a homeless shelter next door to your house, you probably wouldn't feel great about that, especially if that population was the substance abusing type. And we were like, well, we're gonna give these guys a shot, because I've seen these businesses, I don't know what they're called, like methadone clinics and things like that in New York City, which are programs to get people off of heroin, right? And methadone is a treatment for heroin. And I see what that does to the immediate surroundings of that business, of the methadone clinic. And it's very detrimental. You have people selling drugs all on the street all day long. You have people hanging out on the street all day long. These are not good looking characters. And, you know, you have lots of people who are on drugs showing up to these facilities. A lot of crime.
So you know what the solution to that problem is? Because I'm not denying that it is a problem. Because like if I owned a business and a methadone clinic opened up right next door to me, I would probably be like, this isn't good. But you're talking about how, let's say, that particular block rapidly declines because of the type of people it creates. So, and this is again like,
I think I know what you're going to say. I think I know what you're going to say. I'm doing a little research as you say it, but please go ahead.
This is more throwing money at the issue things. But if you open up one of these clinics and you know that it's going to be attracting, for lack of a better term, an unsavory populace to that area, then you need to increase police presence and stuff like that.
I knew that's what you were going to say, and I just found what I was looking for. The police precinct is on the same block.
Right. I know. I'm aware of. I knew I was walking into that, and my response to that is like, not only do you need to have a police presence, but the police need to actually do something. Because
and I actually have notes on that, because you get a really good point, because the police aren't doing anything right now. Among healthcare not working, among mental health treatment not working, among the money that we're pouring into the homelessness problem, our prisons are failing, the judicial system is failing, and then law enforcement, the system is vastly useless. I think law enforcement, I would say that law enforcement is not deployed nearly as well as it could be. I would say somewhere in the 40th percentile. And, you know, the way that I think of things is like the number of traffic tickets or benign citations that are issued from police versus the actual crime that they're stopping. And something I thought about today was, I wonder how many parking tickets were handed out in the immediate vicinity of Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, the day the elementary school got shot up, and the police waited outside because they didn't think they should send anybody in from the outside, because enough people were going to die inside. They didn't want to add to the population of dead people.
Talking about that incident would be an entire cast as to how terrible that day was for everybody.
But think about the police action there. And that's, you know,
there wasn't much. There's a lot of standing around.
You remember 3 years ago, I told this story in the podcast. I was driving to work during the pandemic. So basically everything was shut down. Crazy amount of homeless people on the streets. We're talking tents and just basically like on street cities that were built up of homeless people. And I was driving down a one-way street going the correct direction, went to park. And as I pulled up to two cars, and there was enough space between the two cars. So I pulled out, and as I turned over my shoulder to look behind me, there was a man in a sleeping bag who I had just awoken, and he got out of the sleeping bag and started freaking out and chasing me. And of course, my bike was pointed in the opposite direction because I had turned to park. I was backing into the space. So I pulled out and drove down the road the other way. And then the police pulled me over. And I ended up with 2 points on my license, which also brought up my insurance because this is a driving infraction worthy of 2 points, driving the wrong way on a one-way street. And I was pleading with I wasn't pleading with the cops. I was like, guys, like, there's a crazy person chasing me. You didn't see this guy? Like, you can't miss him. You look down the road. He's there in his sleeping bag, or he's walking away with his sleeping bag tucked under his elbow. And they did nothing.
I would have gone to court and fought that one.
I did go to court and fight that one. And literally absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And
I would have said, like, I tried to park and I got chased away from the parking spot by a homeless guy. And, like, I drove away in the direction my bike was pointed while I was trying to park. I had to make a choice between violating a small traffic rule or possibly getting stabbed.
Well, this wasn't a small traffic rule. This is a 2-point infraction. I did go to court and I argued the hell out of it and I lost. And I was not a happy guy. But again, we're calling these people homeless people, and while they are unhoused, they're not the majority of homeless people are people that are going to shelters. I think in New York City right now, it's like 60 something thousand people that sleep in shelters. Most of these people you wouldn't know as you walked down the street. A lot of them you may not know if you worked alongside of them, unless you were close. You might be aware. A lot of these guys are, they're down in their luck because they lost a job or victims of domestic abuse, things like that. But again, that's not the face of homelessness that we're talking about right now.
No, but that's also not the problem with homelessness. Like, those are the people that, if they're going to a shelter and they're trying to get a job and they're trying to find housing and they're trying to make the steps to get themselves back on their feet, like, that's a problem, but it's not the problem. The problem with homelessness is the people on the streets that disrupt you, that detract from your experience of being in a city, either visually, just because it's not pleasant to look at, like, people in decrepit poverty, or directly in terms of harassing you and possibly assaulting you. And
so how do we solve that? How do we solve the crazies and the mentally ill, which is really where our focus is? I just thought
bring back institutions, man.
That's exactly my thoughts. Bring back,
because putting these people in jail doesn't help them.
Well, and they also end up getting let out of jail because they're just not mentally stable, and
right.
A lot of these are low-level infractions that are just
but
not.
But they're not really the people that you want in jail, anyways, because, like, they're just, I don't know. They're not prisoners. They need help, and they're not necessarily choosing this life for themselves, because if they were to get treatment, they would probably make other choices. And so, and there might be some people whose mental illness is so profound that, like, there might not be much treatment available. But in that case, you put them in an institution so that way they have a safe place to exist where they can't harm themselves or others. And that's just a cost that we as a society have to bear, of treating some people humanely, because the alternative is we let them out on the street and they harm themselves and others, or we pay the relatively small cost to keep them in a mental institution and try and give them the best care we have.
But also, yeah, that mental institution is going to be a lot less costly to run than it is going to be to put these people into a prison system, which costs money. The court system costs money. The police system costs money.
And it also ties up the court system and the police system from dealing with actual problems.
Exactly. I think the issue with the institutions is having an agreed upon metric for them to be released, and to have that be relatively transparent and publicly heard.
Having institutions in the same form that they were in like the 1950s is not a good starting point.
No,
You could
because
look
there's no
into
transparency. You were just
well, there's
locked
no
in.
transparency, and like the treatment of people in those institutions wasn't the best. Um, like watch Shutter Island, which I know it's fiction, but like it draws on real world things. Um,
Well, I think they
so
treated the main guy pretty well in terms of the main guy.
well, yeah, but that was the whole
No
movie.
spoilers. No spoilers.
But um, like having a modern approach to institutionalizing people, where like you get people that are experts on mental health together and put together a system where there is an exit path from institutions, but there are some people that probably just need to be institutionalized. And you might not there are probably some people whose problems are so profound that they're just not going to make it out. And that sucks to say, but it's also probably true.
Now, on homelessness, and one thing I want to add before we go there, anybody who's watching us, whether they're watching us on TikTok or Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, if you guys have not subscribed, well, you're really hurting our feelings. We'd love to have you as a regular viewer, and we'd love your comments, even if they're mean. We actually really like the mean comments. So if you're out there, you haven't subscribed, subscribe, follow us, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any audio podcast platform, YouTube. You get my funny YouTube video artwork on a weekly basis. Love to see more of you guys. And your comments. And we can see your comments if you comment on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. We can see your comments in real time. So institutions, I think you and I can both agree on as a solution to homeless, to the mentally ill being on the streets.
And I've got like if I were to bullet point it, I would say one, it needs more. We need more money towards homelessness. Two, a good portion of that money needs to go towards finding housing for these people. Three, we need to have more programs that meet people where they are. And four, for we need to bring back institutions for the people that are most severely affected by mental illness or substance abuse.
So when I told you earlier today that I was having thoughts on this recently, I had seen a post about affordable housing in other countries, and there were these micro apartments, which were just kind of rooms with a single bed, a little sink, and like a TV or a desk. Very small rooms, maybe
Like 200 or 300 square feet.
Smaller, like 80 to 100 square feet, like just a room size, 8 by 10, 10 by 10 rooms. And they were what we would call in New York City an SRO, single room occupancy buildings. And those buildings are full of effectively individual single room dorms where some of them have kitchenettes, and they have a shared bathroom facility. A lot of times, maybe some of the times, but it's not always just a one toilet, one shower situation. It's a little more dorm style, and that sounds lousy, but you could also make it quite nice. You could add some privacy to the bathrooms. You could add cleaning services for the building.
It's also better than the street.
It's better than the street, and rather than taking somebody. What we did during the pandemic in New York City was we took these crazy ass mentally ill people and we stuck them in very nice hotels in very nice neighborhoods, and they terrorized the fuck out of those neighborhoods and the residents of the neighborhood. And
think about being an employee at one of those hotels.
It was wild, especially when they started reopening restaurants and we started exploring, going out to eat. And a lot of the times we were sitting in the outdoor seating because they were building the outdoor kind of picnic areas on the streets for these restaurants, and just watching what was happening on the streets for the first time. Because a lot of people were still, especially the super early days of the reopening, a lot of people were still a bit reluctant to go out and eat at restaurants, but the streets were still full. It's just that the streets weren't full with people doing business, walking to and from. The streets were full of just crazy ass people. I remember watching one night the ambulance came and they took this guy off the street and then somehow he escaped on a wheelchair, and another homeless guy was like helping him, running away from the paramedics.
Right, so
And I'm just
the
sitting
idea
there
of
eating my.
escaping out a wheelchair, like, how did you guys not catch him?
I don't. I mean, he didn't get that far. We watched the whole thing go. You got half a block.
I mean,
Maybe.
the only way you're escaping out a wheelchair is if like you're rolling downhill.
It was a wild scene during those times, and it wasn't good. It wasn't cool to be out on the streets eating dinner and watching this. It's a funny story now, but it's just like, fuck, like, is that really going on?
Well, just because it's a good story doesn't mean it's a good experience.
And yeah, I got a lot like that. A lot of stories like that.
Most of my stories.
But I think the real affordable housing, those hotels weren't charging the city $30 a night. They were probably still charging $600 a night plus a meal and other expenses. So
and the eventual damages.
Yeah, and the damages that were happening no matter what.
You know what? I just want a quick change of perspective. Imagine you're like a heroin addict homeless person, and for the past 2 years you just been sleeping on the street, and then this weird ass pandemic happens. The streets completely clear out, and then like one day a police officer says, "See that 5-star hotel? You're gonna be staying there."
The thing from the perspective of the homeless people, the pandemic was great because they just had total free reign of the streets. I saw people like barbecuing, and they had like tent. We don't have tent cities in New York City like they do in California. We had like blocks that were just covered in tents, people chilling out for weeks and weeks and weeks, unbothered. And there's a few drugstores that I would go to just for like regular supplies, like to grab some Pepsi Maxes, or to grab some breakfast or whatever on my walk to the office. And regularly these places were being robbed, like hardcore, just people going through with just bags, throwing shit in there,
and
people
just walking out,
vandalizing the stores. Yeah, really bad. So look, there's a comment on the, I was hoping you would notice this, but it looks like Elizabeth noticed this. The Go-Go Girl drink mixer. We got about 3 minutes left. Do we have time for me? Are we good on this topic?
Yeah, we can go light for the last 3 minutes.
Okay, good. So look, my grandmother had a house in upstate New York, and it was very much influenced by the 60s and maybe the early 70s. So they had a bar in the basement, and I have some not so vague memories, some pretty solid memories of this bar. And I remember on the bar, so I'm building a bar in my basement, and I wanted to draw some influence from something that I know from my history, and the 1960s type era bar really stuck with me. So I remember they had this drink mixer, and I remember it being kind of like a fugly, hookery looking Barbie doll. And she just it was a hula girl drink mixer. She just kind of wiggled her hips. So I've been searching hula girl drink mixer for months. No avail. Couldn't find it. I recently found the Go-Go Girl mixer. This is it.
I feel like that would be very well in place at the Honeywell.
It would. And I found it. So it was $250, 200 plus $250 in new condition. This one was new in box. Like, it literally, her hair is perfect, never touched, but it didn't work. They tested it. It didn't work. So I actually got it working. She's got a drink in her hands here. No liquid in there. And here's the Go-Go Girl drink mixer in action. Little hip thrust.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really going to do a good job mixing your drink.
It'll stop in a second. But she's got she's got makeup on. She's
I think you need some WD-40 for those gears.
There are just gears spinning underneath. I tried to take it apart. I actually broke something. A screw popped out and some plastic fell out. I was like, oh, fuck. And then I started to put it back together and accidentally hit the on button and it started working. So
I'm open to suggestions. I want something hilarious as a neon sign for my garage. Like something that's just completely out of place. Like I saw one bride to be, and I was thinking about getting that.
The bride to be neon sign.
Yeah.
We got to sign off on Instagram.
Either that or live nudes.
We got to sign off on Instagram. I'll continue the conversation for just a minute, but our exit music's going to start. We're going to say goodbye to you guys on Instagram. So make sure you follow
Thanks
us.
to Rosh for feeding us your comments.
Make sure you guys follow us on the other platforms. And don't forget, we got Rosh Galeb feeding us your Facebook and Instagram comments. So adios, Instagram. Bye-bye, guys. Pause our exit music. I talk just while we're on air for another minute about your so we're kind of off the topic of homelessness, guys. Now we're just shooting the shit a little bit. I'm curious though your thoughts for the garage. So you've got you moved out the old pool table. What was wrong with the old pool table again? Remind me.
It was a budget pool table. I bought it for $100, and like it was a single piece slate, which sounds better.
You needed work done on it though, yeah?
I needed to replace the rails because the rails were all playing really dead. And I called up the pool, like there's a pool shop that does like sales and service on pool tables. And I called them up, I was like, how much would it cost for you guys to replace the rails on my pool table? And they're like, well, it's not just the rails. We'd also have to like sell you the cloth because like you have to put the cloth on the rails, and we don't sell cloth in just like rail cover amounts. It's like one big piece of cloth that we then cut up to put on the rails, and then the rest goes on the pool table. And so the cloth alone is like $400 or $500, and then like the rails
more than you paid for the table,
huh? Well, it's way more than I paid for the table.
Yeah.
So yeah, the cloth plus, and then the rails would be like $400 or $500, and then I'd have to pay for like the servicing on it, and it would have cost probably somewhere around like $1,000 to $1,100 to recover and re-rail my table.
And again, it was a solid piece pool table.
So it's a single piece slate, and the frame of the table was particle board. When it's old particle board, so it's absorbed a lot of moisture. So like parts of it were swelling. It wasn't like if you pushed on it, it would sway. And with single piece slate, like it's impossible to get it perfectly level because like if you push up on one part to try and get that part level, like another part will move. So like the table wasn't perfectly level, and also like so the slate, what they do is like they machine it. So they take like a big slab of slate, and then they take like these grinders that spin and machine it down so it's smooth. And so the slate on my table, like the grooves were pretty deep. So like if you rubbed your finger over the bare slate, like you could feel the texture of like when it was machined down. And that had the effect of making the balls run slower because even though the cloth smoothed out the texture of the slate, like the balls could still feel it, and they're just running over all these micro grooves.
All right, so look, I'm curious what your proposed enhancements for your garage are. I was just asking you briefly.
Well, so brand new pool table. Well, not new. It's a used pool table, but this one's way more expensive and way nicer. But like my approach to decorating my house is kind of the same approach that my roommate takes towards tattoos, which is I'm only going to do it if it's funny or stupid. Like I don't really care about tasteful or.
I feel like that's a bad approach to tattoos, but
well, yeah, but it's his body. Like this is all right. You'll like this. When he was in college, he got a tattoo of a strawberry on his butt, like on like his upper butt cheek.
I don't think.
No. Hold on.
I think you've told me this.
The scratch and sniff. He was in a bar and he was hitting on a chick, and like eventually like got her to believe that he had a scratch and sniff tattoo on his butt. So he got this tattoo for one joke in a bar, which did the opposite of getting him laid.
Yeah, clearly. I don't think I think if you're getting tattoos to be as stupid as possible or as funny as possible, the likeliness of getting laid off your tattoos. If you're getting tattoos to get laid, I think you got your priorities.
Right. So I'm not doing that with tattoos, but like if I'm decorating the house, I want it to be funny. Like I've got a sign in Russian, and when you first walk in the house, I remember showing you this like a year ago. Because when Ukraine got invaded, like within the first month, one of the things they did was they
Oh, you have a
realized that
road sign. I know exactly what road sign you have. Yeah, you have a
yeah.
road sign.
Yeah, I had a custom made road sign where I took a picture from like Ukraine's Department of the Interior, sent it to a company that makes custom road signs, and it says in Russian, translated, and it's got like the little arrows like pointing like forward, left, and right. And translated, it's go F yourself, go F yourself again, and go F yourself back to Russia.
And this is in your living room?
No, it's when you open the front door to the house. Like you're faced with a hallway to your left, a room to your right, and a small hallway directly in front of you, maybe about 10 feet long. So the first thing you see when you walk in my house is a road sign pointing directions. And
Saying to go fuck yourself.
but it's in Russian, so unless you speak Russian, you're not going to know what it means.
Oh
But
boy.
yeah, so like one of my friends was like, "Hey, can you remind me what your sign says again?" I said, "Go off yourself." He's like, "What? Why?" And I was like, "No, that's what the sign says."
So tell me, look, this is Sip Talk. You're building a nice kind of garage bar type situation. It's not a bar. You got a bar in your living room, I think. But I'm curious more. So you get the new pool table. You got a little bit of a media center with some plug and play options. You got a video option with a monitor. Got some nice speakers out there. What else? What else you got going?
It's mostly like decorations to put up on the walls, and I want like weird or dumb things. Another thing that I want to get, I saw a picture of it was something in a coffee shop where like they put like a map of the world up, but it was like
Mhm.
all wrong. They didn't mean to because like whoever they paid just was like, well, we're like where like New Zealand isn't even on the map, and like a whole bunch of stuff is mislabeled. Where like when you quickly glance at it, you're like, yeah, that's a map of the world. And when you actually look at the labels, you're like for example, New York is up in like the middle of Canada. Texas is all of the United States.
Oh
And
man. Look,
and
so I mean, that's actually funny. I'd like to see the map.
I'll see if
If
I
you
can
can get
find
a
the link
picture.
for you. But like, I wanted to find something like that of like something where like when you first glance at it, it looks fine, and like when the more you look at it, the more wrong it becomes.
I got
But not in a disturbing way.
a coffee table book. So it's a thick book. It's 3 inches thick. It's 20 inches tall, 10 inches wide, and uh, it's a book. The Codex Seraphinus or something along these lines. Rosh has seen it, and it's written in a language that doesn't exist, that doesn't translate and doesn't make sense, with these wacky, wonky illustrations. And it's designed to be read and interpreted by an adult, for the adult to feel the way that a child feels who can't read but picks up a book and tries to understand what's going on.
That sounds
But
really interesting.
it feels like there's a narrative. It looks interesting and you're intrigued, but you're not quite able to like pick up on what's going on. And it's a really cool experience. And now that I've told you, you won't have that experience probably per se, but I learned that after getting the book and reading the book. That's exactly the experience I had. It's definitely akin to like
Click the link that I sent.
4-year-old picking up that book. I'd love to see if I can screen share this one. So Rosh is moving the text here. All right. Let's see. Let me see if I can screen share your image here.
It's brilliant, really.
Korea, Japan, Australia, India. It's a good map.
India
I like
is
it.
Madagascar.
Yeah.
Singapore is India.
Canada.
Paris is somewhere in Finland.
Yeah, this is good. I like this. I like this. And where is this, a coffee shop somewhere?
Yes. Texas is north of New York.
In Canada.
Yes.
And New York is all of the United States.
And Canada is Greenland.
Yeah, Canada's Greenland. I saw that. It's and then Asia is Russia, which Russia is Asia, but most people don't think of it that way.
And then you've got the Arctic Ocean.
The Southern Ocean?
The Southern Ocean's a real thing, but
Really?
look at
Okay.
the Arctic.
What am I missing?
The Arctic. Not Arctic. Arctic.
Arctic. Okay, I like it. So this is just a map for idiots.
Yeah. So I want something like that to put up where, like, when you first glance at it, it looks fine.
I wouldn't have noticed anything. So it looks good to me. This is great. This is really great. All right. On that note, I'm excited for your garage renovations. I'll be working on my bar renovations. Have I sent you any pictures? Have I shown you anything with this bar I'm building?
No, like the last I saw was like you had like the wall stripped down and like you had the water lines kind of exposed for a bar sink.
Okay, yeah. So it's getting there. Very slow because I'm just very indecisive. So I'm not quite sure which actions to take. I took the wall behind the bar. I was going to take out and build inlaid shelving. So
yeah, I like that idea.
I took the wall out, and rather than going back the width of a 2x4, it goes back the width of a 2x2, and then there's a brick wall. So
you can do like partially inlaid.
That's I got a 4-inch board, and I'm going to do 2-inch inlay, 2-inch out. But of course, you run the risk of your back hitting it because now it extends out from the wall. But everything will be good. No worries, everybody. We're going to conclude this episode. I want to thank you guys for joining us. It's been a long episode, so I appreciate your patience and your interest in our topic. Again, I want to thank Rash Galeb for feeding us your comments. It's nice to have Rash back, who's also in South Carolina. Now he's back in the real world, Texas. On that note, everyone, thanks for joining again, and adios.
Laters.
This is the other end. Thank you for making it this far. If you made it this far, sounds like it's time for you to subscribe. So hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.
I like PBR. I just got priced out of it.